Rain pattered softly against the windows of Wayward Books, creating a rhythm that Rachel White had come to associate with her busiest days. Something about the rain drew people into her small downtown bookstore, seeking refuge among the shelves of carefully curated titles and the comforting scent of paper and binding glue. She balanced on her tiptoes, sliding a first edition Fitzgerald back onto its proper shelf when the bell above the door chimed. The man who stepped in shook raindrops from his umbrella, his tailored charcoal suit distinctly out of place among the casual browsers. Rachel had seen him before, tall with broad shoulders and dark hair peppered with just enough silver at the temples to suggest experience rather than age. He always browsed the classics section, occasionally wandering to modern literature, and paid in cash. No small talk, just thoughtful selections and a polite nod. Today would mark his 6th visit in 2 months. "Good morning," Rachel called from her perch on the ladder. "Let me know if I can help you find anything." The man looked up, his deep blue eyes meeting hers. "Actually," he said, his voice resonant in the quiet store, "I'm looking for something on maritime history, particularly the Age of Exploration." Rachel climbed down, brushing dust from her floral dress. "You're in luck. I just received a collection from an estate sale. Follow me." She led him to a corner of the shop where several unmarked boxes still awaited sorting. "I haven't cataloged these yet, but there were some fascinating journals and historical accounts." She began opening boxes, the excitement evident in her movements. The family was descended from a ship captain who sailed under the Dutch East India Company. The man's eyebrows lifted. "That's quite a find for a small bookshop." "Wayward Books might be small, but we're mighty," Rachel replied with a smile. "I have connections with collectors across the country. When they know you respect the material, doors open." "I'm Daniel," he said, extending his hand. "Daniel North." "Rachel White," she replied, her hand disappearing briefly in his firm grip. "Book enthusiast and owner of all you survey in these humble 4 walls." For the first time, Daniel smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face. "Well, Rachel White, I'll trust your expertise. Show me the best of what you've got." Rachel spent the next hour pulling volumes from the unsorted boxes, explaining the significance of each discovery with animated gestures and rapid-fire historical context. Daniel listened intently, asking surprisingly knowledgeable questions and handling each book with reverence. "You know quite a bit about maritime history," Rachel observed as she carefully opened a leather-bound journal from 1742. "My grandfather was obsessed with the sea," Daniel replied, gently turning yellowed pages. "He had a collection that would have made you drool. Unfortunately, it was sold off when he passed before I was old enough to appreciate its value." "That's a shame," Rachel said, genuine sympathy in her voice. "Family collections are special. They tell stories beyond what's written in the books." Daniel nodded, his expression momentarily distant. "Exactly why I'm rebuilding it, piece by piece." By the time Rachel looked up at the clock, 2 hours had passed. The rain had stopped and sunlight filtered through the windows. "I should probably let you get back to your day," she said, suddenly aware of how much time she'd spent with a single customer. "Actually, I'd like to purchase these 4, Daniel said, gesturing to a small stack they'd set aside. "And perhaps you could set the journal aside for me." "I'd like to do some research before committing." Rachel carried the books to the counter. "Of course, I'll keep it behind the counter." As she wrapped each book in brown paper, Daniel studied the shop. "How long have you owned Wayward Books?" "Almost 5 years," Rachel replied, tying string around a package with practiced efficiency. "I bought it when old Mr. Grayson retired. I'd worked here through college, and when he decided to sell, well, it felt like fate." "It suits you," Daniel said simply. Rachel paused, looking up at him. "Thank you. That might be the nicest thing anyone said about the shop." Daniel paid for his purchases again in cash and gathered the wrapped books. "I'll be back for the journal," he said, his tone making it sound like a promise rather than a casual statement. "I'll be here," Rachel replied, watching as he walked out the door. wondering why a man in such an expensive suit carried no credit cards and seemed to have endless hours to spend discussing obscure maritime texts on a Tuesday morning. 3 days later, Daniel returned, this time without the suit. In dark jeans and a blue button-down shirt, he looked more relaxed but no less imposing. Rachel was helping an elderly woman find a gift for her grandson when he entered, and he quietly browsed until she was free. "You came back," Rachel said, approaching him in the history section. "I said I would." He held up a book. "You were right about Magellan's biographers. This one is much better." "I'm always right about books," Rachel laughed. "It's my superpower." "What about coffee?" Daniel asked, his tone casual though his posture had stiffened slightly. "Are you always right about that too?" Rachel tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "I'm opinionated about beans, if that's what you're asking." "I'm asking if you'd like to get coffee," Daniel clarified, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "There's a place around the corner that roasts their own. We could discuss the journal I left behind." Rachel hesitated. She rarely left the store during business hours, but Tuesday afternoons were traditionally slow, and her assistant, Meg, was restocking the young adult section. "Give me 5 minutes to let my assistant know, and I'll join you." The coffee shop was busy with the lunch crowd, but Daniel secured a small table near the window. As they settled with their drinks and Americano for him, a latte for her, Rachel found herself curious about the man across from her. "So, Daniel, what do you do when you're not hunting down maritime history books?" Daniel took a sip of his coffee. "I run a company called North Star Shipping." Rachel's eyes widened. "The international freight company, the one with the big building on the riverfront," he nodded. "That's the one." "Explains the interest in maritime history," Rachel said, processing this information, "and why you can spend Tuesday mornings browsing bookstores." "Actually, Tuesday mornings are usually packed with meetings," Daniel admitted. "I've been rearranging my schedule to make time for your bookstore." Rachel felt heat rise to her cheeks. "For the maritime collection," she clarified. Daniel's eyes held her steadily. "At first, yes." The conversation flowed easily from there, moving from books to childhood memories to favorite travel destinations. Rachel described her dream of expanding the bookstore to include a reading cafe, while Daniel shared stories of ports he'd visited around the world. Before they realized it, an hour had passed. "I should get back," Rachel said reluctantly, checking her watch. "Meg will think I've been kidnapped." Daniel walked her back to the store, stopping outside the door. "I enjoyed this," he said. "Would it be too forward to ask for your number? I'd like to continue our conversation sometime." Rachel found herself writing her number on the back of a Wayward Books bookmark. "The journal will be waiting whenever you're ready," she said, handing him the bookmark. "I'll call you," Daniel promised, his fingers brushing hers as he took the paper. True to his word, Daniel called that evening, and they talked for almost 2 hours. Rachel found herself laughing more than she had in months, drawn to his dry wit and thoughtful observations. By the end of the call, she'd agreed to dinner on Friday night. Friday found Rachel closing the shop early for the first time in years, rushing to her apartment above the bookstore to get ready. She cycled through outfits, finally settling on a deep green dress that brought out her eyes. As she applied a final touch of lipstick, her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Outside whenever you're ready. No rush." Rachel looked out her window to see a sleek black car parked at the curb, Daniel leaning against it in a suit that made her suddenly self-conscious about her modest dress. When she emerged from the shop's side entrance, Daniel straightened, his expression appreciative. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, trying to hide her nervousness. "Though I've never seen you looking anything but immaculate." Daniel opened the car door. "You should see me after a 12-hour flight delay in Manila. Far from immaculate." The restaurant was upscale, the kind of place Rachel had read about but never visited. The maitre d' greeted Daniel by name and led them to a secluded table overlooking the river. Rachel tried not to gawk at the prices on the menu. "Order whatever appeals to you," Daniel said, noticing her hesitation. "The chef here does amazing things with local seafood." Over the meal, Rachel found herself sharing stories she rarely told about her parents' divorce when she was 12, her college dreams of becoming a writer, and how buying the bookstore had changed her life. Daniel listened attentively, asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested. "What about you?" Rachel asked as they shared a chocolate dessert. "How does someone end up running a global shipping empire?" Daniel's expression grew more serious. "Family business, technically. My father built it from a single cargo ship into a regional operation. When he died unexpectedly, I was 26 and working as a naval architect in Boston. I came home for the funeral and never left." "That sounds difficult," Rachel said softly. "It was," Daniel admitted. "I had different plans for my life, but sometimes the path chooses you. Do you regret it?" Rachel asked, genuinely curious. Daniel considered the question. "I did at first. Now I see the value in what we've built. We employ thousands of people across the globe. We deliver essential goods to places that would otherwise be isolated." He paused. "But I missed having something that was purely mine, a passion disconnected from obligation." "And you found that in old books?" Rachel asked with a smile. "In the stories they tell," Daniel clarified, "and recently in the woman who helps me discover them." The evening ended with a walk along the riverfront, the lights of the city reflecting on the water. When Daniel returned her to the bookstore, Rachel found herself reluctant to say goodnight. "Would you like to come up for coffee?" she offered, gesturing to her apartment above the shop. "I have a collection of first editions you might appreciate." Daniel hesitated. "I'd like that very much, but I should get going. Early flight tomorrow, Singapore." "Oh," Rachel said, trying to hide her disappointment. "Of course. Rain check?" he asked, his hand gently touching her cheek. "I'll be back Thursday night," Rachel nodded. "The books and I will be waiting." Daniel leaned down and kissed her softly, a brief touch that still managed to make Rachel's heart race. "Good night, Rachel. Safe travels," she whispered as he walked back to his car. Over the next 2 months, Daniel became a fixture in Rachel's life. Despite his demanding schedule, he found time to visit the bookstore at least once a week. They explored the city together on his free evenings, discovering hidden restaurants, attending poetry readings, walking through parks as summer turned to fall. Rachel learned that beneath his polished exterior was a man who valued simplicity and honesty, who could spend hours discussing a single book, and who remembered every detail she shared. For Rachel's birthday in October, Daniel surprised her with a private tour of a maritime museum's archives, where she was allowed to handle navigation instruments and maps from the 16th century. Watching her excitement, Daniel had never looked happier. "This is amazing," Rachel whispered as a curator showed them a logbook from Magellan's voyage. "How did you arrange this?" "The museum's new wing was funded by the North Star Foundation," Daniel explained. "I called in a favor." "This is the best birthday I've ever had," Rachel said, squeezing his hand. Later, over dinner at a quiet bistro, Daniel presented her with a small package. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a compass rose pendant. "It's beautiful," Rachel breathed as he fastened it around her neck. "A reminder that no matter where I am in the world, my heart is pointed toward you," Daniel said, his usual confidence giving way to vulnerability. Rachel touched the pendant, emotion tightening her throat. "I've fallen in love with you," she admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Daniel's expression softened. "I loved you the third time I visited your shop," he confessed, "when you spent an hour explaining why Moby Dick is misunderstood as merely a story about a whale." Rachel laughed through sudden tears. "That's a very specific moment to pinpoint. Your passion for stories, for knowledge, it's extraordinary," Daniel said, taking her hand. "I've spent my life surrounded by people motivated by profit margins and market share. You care about preserving history, sharing ideas, creating a space where stories matter." As fall progressed, Rachel began to realize how different their worlds truly were. Daniel's life included board meetings, international travel, and charity galas, while hers revolved around ordering inventory, planning reading events, and balancing tight budgets. Though he never made her feel inadequate, Rachel sometimes wondered if their relationship had an expiration date. Those doubts surfaced one evening in November when Daniel invited her to a formal benefit for the North Star Foundation. Rachel spent more than she could afford on a dress, nervously preparing to meet Daniel's colleagues and friends. The event was held at the city's grandest hotel, with security checking names at the door and photographers capturing arrivals. Rachel gripped Daniel's arm as they walked in, feeling distinctly out of place among the designer gowns and famous faces. "You look stunning," Daniel whispered, sensing her discomfort. "Everyone here is going to wonder how I got so lucky." Throughout the evening, Rachel was introduced to shipping executives, city officials, and business partners. She smiled and chatted, trying to remember names and connections, acutely aware of curious glances and whispered comments. During a momentary break, Rachel excused herself to find the restroom. As she was washing her hands, she overheard two women at the mirrors. "That's the bookshop owner he's been seeing," one woman said in a low voice. "Apparently, he visits her little store downtown regularly. How quaint," the other replied with a laugh. "Daniel's always had unusual hobbies. Remember when he went through that sailing phase?" "I give it another month before he's bored and moves on." Rachel froze, her chest tightening. She'd had the same fear herself, but hearing it spoken aloud made it suddenly, painfully real. Was she just a novelty to Daniel, a charming diversion from his real life? She returned to Daniel's side with a forced smile, but he immediately sensed something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked quietly as they stood at the edge of the ballroom. "Nothing," Rachel insisted, "just feeling a bit out of my depth." Daniel studied her face, unconvinced. "Would you like to leave?" "We can't," Rachel protested. "You're hosting this event." "Watch me," Daniel said, taking her hand. He quickly spoke to his assistant, then led Rachel through a side exit to where his car waited. They drove in silence until Daniel pulled up to a viewpoint overlooking the city. He turned off the engine and shifted to face her. "Now, tell me what really happened." Rachel hesitated, then recounted the conversation she'd overheard. "And the worst part is, I've had the same thought," she admitted. "That maybe I'm just temporary, a break from your real life." Daniel's expression darkened. "Those women know nothing about my life or what matters to me." "But they're not entirely wrong, are they?" Rachel pressed. "We do come from different worlds. Sometimes I wonder what you see in me, in my little bookstore and my simple life." "Simple," Daniel repeated. "Rachel, there's nothing simple about the life you've built. You've created a haven of knowledge and imagination. You connect people with ideas that change how they see the world." He took her hands in his. "Do you know what I saw the first time I walked into Wayward Books?" Rachel shook her head. "I saw someone who had found their purpose, who loved what they did so completely that it radiated from them." His voice grew softer. "I was drowning in responsibility, in expectations, in a role I inherited rather than chose. Walking into your shop was like coming up for air." "I don't want to be your escape from real life," Rachel said quietly. "I want to be part of it." "You misunderstand," Daniel said. "You didn't become my escape. You showed me what real life could be, should be. Filled with passion and meaning, not just obligation." He squeezed her hands. "I don't love you despite your bookstore, Rachel. I love you because of it, because of who you are when you're there, doing what you love." Rachel felt tears threatening. "I love you too, but I'm scared of losing myself in your world, of becoming an accessory." "Then we build our own world," Daniel said simply. "One that has room for both of us to be exactly who we are." That night marked a turning point. In the weeks that followed, Daniel began sharing more of his work life with Rachel, explaining challenges and seeking her perspective. Rachel, in turn, invited him deeper into her world, allowing him to help with store events and introducing him to her literary circle. As Christmas approached, Rachel noticed Daniel seemed distracted, often taking calls outside her apartment and being vague about his schedule. Her old insecurities began to resurface, despite her efforts to trust their connection. The week before Christmas, Daniel asked Rachel to meet him at the bookstore after closing. "Wear something warm," he instructed. "We're going on an adventure." Rachel locked up the shop at 6, curious and slightly apprehensive. Daniel arrived punctually, a mysterious smile on his face as he helped her into the car. "Where are we going?" Rachel asked as they drove out of the downtown area. "You'll see," Daniel replied, his eyes focused on the road. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to the riverfront district, stopping outside a historic building with large windows. The area was being redeveloped, with several storefronts under renovation. Daniel led Rachel to a specific building, unlocking the door and guiding her inside. The space was cavernous and empty, with exposed brick walls and hardwood floors. Large windows faced the river, capturing the twinkling lights of the city. A single table stood in the center of the room, set with candles, wine glasses, and a small wrapped box. "What is this place?" Rachel asked, turning in a circle to take in the space. Daniel watched her reaction carefully. "It could be the new location of Wayward Books if you want it to be." Rachel's eyes widened. "What?" "Daniel, I could never afford. The North Star Foundation is establishing a cultural preservation initiative," Daniel explained. "We're providing grants for independent bookstores, starting with this building." He gestured around the space. "Triple the square footage of your current location, with an apartment upstairs that rivals any penthouse in the city. And the best part," he led her to the back of the building, opening another door to reveal a smaller room with a perfect view of the water, room for that reading cafe you've always wanted. Rachel stood speechless, trying to process what he was saying. "You bought this for my bookstore." "The foundation did," Daniel clarified. "But yes, with you in mind. The grant covers renovation costs and 5 years of reduced rent, after which you'd have first option to purchase at a fixed price." He took her hands. "You'd have complete creative control. This isn't about changing Wayward Books, it's about giving it room to grow." Rachel's mind raced through possibilities. "But my current location has history, character. We can preserve that character in the design," Daniel assured her. "But think of what you could do with this space, Rachel. Community reading programs, author events, workshops." Rachel walked slowly around the empty room, imagining shelves filled with books, comfortable chairs by the windows, children sprawled on rugs for story time. "It's incredible," she admitted. "A dream come true." "There's more," Daniel said softly. He led her to the table and pulled out her chair. After she was seated, he handed her the small wrapped box. "This part is just from me, no foundation involved." Rachel unwrapped the package with trembling fingers. Inside was a velvet ring box. Her heart pounded as she opened it to reveal a vintage engagement ring and emerald surrounded by small diamonds. "It belonged to my grandmother," Daniel said, kneeling beside her chair. She was also a woman who knew her own mind and followed her passion. Tears blurred Rachel's vision as Daniel took her hand. "Rachel White, I love your brilliant mind, your generous heart, and your unwavering dedication to what matters to you. I want to build a life with you, one that honors who we both are and what we both value." His voice grew thick with emotion. "Will you marry me?" "Yes," Rachel whispered, the word barely audible through her tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with an intensity that left no doubt about his feelings. When they finally separated, Rachel rested her head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. "Did you really create a foundation initiative just so you could give me a bigger bookstore?" she asked, looking up at him with a mixture of amusement and awe. Daniel laughed. "The initiative was already in development. I just made sure the pilot program happened in our city." His expression grew more serious. "But I would have created it for you if necessary. Your passion for books, for creating a space where stories are treasured that deserves to be protected and expanded." "What about the women who think I'm just your quaint hobby?" Rachel asked, only half joking. Daniel brushed a strand of hair from her face. "They're about to witness the bookstore owner becoming the director of the North Star Literacy Foundation, with a substantial budget and a mandate to support independent bookstores nationwide." His eyes twinkled. "If you're interested in the position, that is." Rachel stared at him. "You want me to run your foundation?" "I want you to do what you do best: champion books, literacy, and independent thinking, but on a larger scale," Daniel clarified, "while still running the best damn bookstore in the city." Rachel's mind spun with possibilities. That's incredible. But are you sure I'm qualified? More than qualified, Daniel assured her. And selfishly, it means you might occasionally join me on my international trips. There are some amazing bookstores in Singapore I'd love to show you. Rachel kissed him again, overwhelmed by emotion. When did you start planning all this? The moment I walked into Wayward Books 8 months ago and saw a beautiful woman so passionate about maritime history that she spent 2 hours with a complete stranger, showing him treasures she hadn't even cataloged yet. Daniel smiled at the memory. I knew then that you were extraordinary. That Christmas Eve, Rachel closed the original Wayward Books early for a private party. Her assistant Meg, along with a few regular customers and friends, gathered among the shelves to celebrate not just the holiday, but the engagement and the bookstore's expansion plans. As Rachel watched Daniel chatting easily with her literary circle, laughing at a story from her most eccentric regular customer, she felt a profound sense of rightness. The CEO in the expensive suit and the bookstore owner had found common ground in their shared values: a love of history, a respect for knowledge, and a belief in preserving the stories that connected humanity across time. 6 months later, on a warm summer evening, Rachel and Daniel married in the newly renovated Wayward Books Riverside location, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and people they loved. The space had been transformed into exactly what Rachel had envisioned: an expanded version of her original store, with comfortable reading nooks, a bustling cafe, and regular community events. After the ceremony, as guests mingled among the bookshelves, Daniel found Rachel standing by the maritime history section, which now included his grandfather's restored collection, recovered piece by piece over the previous months. Having second thoughts, Mrs. North? He asked, slipping his arm around her waist. Rachel smiled up at him, touching the compass rose necklace she still wore daily. Just thinking about how different our lives were a year ago. You were the mysterious man in the suit who kept browsing my classics section, and I was the extraordinary woman who built a world out of words, Daniel finished, kissing her forehead. Some things haven't changed at all. As they rejoined their guests, Rachel caught sight of the 2 women from the charity gala, now enthusiastically discussing the Literacy Foundation's international initiatives with Meg. She smiled to herself, thinking of the journey that had brought them all here, a journey that began with a rainy day, a man seeking maritime history books, and a bookseller who had no idea that her passion for stories would write her own happy ending.